This job can take you places. It can connect you with cultures and people you just never imagined being in the same room with. Client-side people go to agency, or agency people go to client-side are just better for it. Anyone trying to sell anything should understand the timing, life cycle of planning in any business.
Welcome to the Early Insights podcast, an opportunity to understand exactly what it takes to build a career in data, research, and insights, and the many different ways to do so. I'm your host, Lewis Reeves, founder and CEO of Walr, and today we have a fantastic guest. Not only has he led insights departments at some of the industry-defining brands, he's also given a huge amount back to our sector. A very big warm welcome to Nick Rich.
Thank you very much, Lewis. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on the podcast, and I'm super excited to unpack this career that you've had, and really feels like you have ridden the peaks of some incredible brands, and so I'm sure there's some brilliant insights to get into.
Well, I'm looking forward to this because this many years into a career, this is probably the first therapy session I've had to go and revisit some of the mistakes, the successes, the choices. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Stuff. Well, Nick, I'm going to take you right back to the beginning, and having done a bit of research on you, I'm going to guess before you went to university, you perhaps didn't have an insight career planned out. So take me back to that time. What were you thinking as you were heading to university, and tell us what you studied?
So at university, I studied essentially a business degree, but focused on tourism. You're right, I didn't have a career in the insights industry in mind, but what I did, upon reflection, have an interest in people.
Okay.
So even though I was doing a business degree, and it was focused on the world of tourism management, and largely the influence for that was my father at the time, who was working in tourism. I think as a young, impressionable person who doesn't necessarily know their direction, you take influence from what's around you. Yeah. And it sounded good, tourism. It sounded exciting. I went in to do that degree, and what I realized is everything I wrote about, my dissertation, a lot of the kind of free choice projects, was about psychology and human choices and human nature and the decisions they make, the customer journey of travel and those experiences. And I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I was always writing about humans and people and how they live their lives and the choices they make. So, my dissertation was absolutely on that, how to drive people forward in business and how to bring teams along, how to kind of have connectivity. And so when I found myself thinking about a job, I'd begun to think, well, okay, anywhere I can understand people is going to be a good thing. I still didn't realize I wanted a market research career, but I took a job like the Monday after I finished. I finished university on the Friday. On the Monday morning, I started Harris Research in Richmond, and I started on the telephones. Yeah. So immediately I was doing calls with people. On that first day, it was about company cars. I got told to go away on my very first call. And that was the kind of thing, the triggers you need. You think, well, this is interesting. Yeah. Didn't put me off. And then within a year, I joined BMRB on their graduate program, and I've never looked back.
Fantastic. It's really interesting. You're not the first person to be on the podcast that's got some form of sort of tourism, leisure industry background. And I think one of the parallels that I see are those sort of soft social skills that, when you're giving experiences in that tourism industry, the way in which you make people feel is so important. Is that something you saw benefit you later on in your career when you're trying to sell into stakeholders and so on?
You do, and I go back to the point about you take influence from those around you. And I think this is probably a theme we'll come back to. Different stages in your career, you meet people or you're just around people that really influence you. Take hospitality. If you want to talk customer service, there's no industry better at that. And when you see someone who is absolutely the top of their game, like a GM from a boutique hotel, and how they move and control and spot things, it's just like watching the best ballerina, the best footballer, the best cricketer, whatever it may be. They just excel, and you just begin to pick up those cues of what is it that's important to them. Yeah. And you learn from that. And throughout my career, I always value the people I work with. And particularly, there's a handful of names I think we probably all have across this industry who I just learned more than anything else from them.
Yeah, indeed.
And they gave me passion and excitement. And when I didn't understand there was a career to have in this, they showed me that actually there was,
Yeah.
and what that looked like. So whether it's been my father influencing me to kind of go into tourism and then deciding maybe not, that wasn't necessarily what I really wanted to go into, the people I've met in my early stages in Insights.
Really inspired it.
I can give a couple of names. Trevor Wilkinson, I owe an awful lot to. He's a name, he's very much, in big and the business to business side of things.
Yeah.
But he was my early boss, and he gave me the chance to really move from the technical side of research to the research side of research.
Yeah.
And I owe him an awful lot. And there's been people like that that have just influenced me and really driven me throughout my career.
Well, let's get into it then.
Yeah.
So you find yourself in the late 90s at Nokia, which must have just been the most fascinating time, as Nokia would have been on the up and up at this time.
When I joined, I think they'd been a month at number one.
Wow.
Taken over Motorola. I went there really because the only thing I knew was I'd done my training on the agency side.
Yeah.
If I want to go somewhere in this world, I need client side. And yeah, Nokia sounded like a good place to be. I didn't realize what doors that would open up for me.
Sure.
But I was just making a very kind of cold, hard career decision.
Yeah.
Because I needed to broaden my experience. But walking into a business that I felt very, very young, but then asking you to go all over the world, I had to pinch myself in terms of the places I found myself doing research in India and China, Brazil, Russia, all these places I'd never expected to go to.
Wow. And this is you in your sort of mid-20s by this point?
Yeah, mid to
amazing.
kind of getting into late 20s. I never expected to be standing on the Great Wall or Tiananmen Square or in the Red Square and knowing I was there for research, but what the hell am I doing here?
Fascinating.
And that just inspires you. You think, okay, this job can take you places. It can connect you with cultures and people you just never imagined being in the same room with. And that was just that was thrilling for me.
And thinking back to a business like Nokia at that point, as they were really rising and taking that number one spot and maximizing it, what sort of role did Insight play in that organization at that time?
So really important. It was a very small team actually when I joined, a very big one when I left. It played a really important part, particularly in product development. It was a technology company. It was very into its products. So the lion's share of what we did was about products and categories. So what products should look like, feel like, what functionality they have. So that was a really good learning for me. I was coming from a kind of generalist agency, doing research about ball bearings and credit cards and hotels and things like that, to getting really deep into product management. Yeah. Getting really deep into marketing that I hadn't, in a way, been exposed to that before. And then you're moving into, the emerging markets. So I was very much responsible for emerging markets, which meant going into Africa and South Asia and the BRIC markets. And that opened up my eyes to things like segmentation, need states. Again, I'd never been exposed to this stuff, but the first question you ask is, okay, we want to break into new consumer groups. They don't have so much money. Yeah. How do we build something for them? How do we build a $10 phone? And what's it going to have on it? And why do they want to communicate? Yeah. And so suddenly we were doing all this human work, this human understanding. And that just opened up my mind, and it was amazing.
And one presumes Nokia's success allowed budgets to let you work with best-in-class agencies and really see the cutting edge.
Yeah, all sorts. I think, yes, it did. Nokia made so much money, it probably got to the point, I think, which is proved by history, that they took all the risks that a business needs to take to get to the top. Yeah. And then slowly but surely, when you're at the top, all you're thinking about is protecting that, and you begin to take less risks. Yeah. And what was happening, I think, is spending an awful lot of money. They were making an awful lot of money, but not necessarily in the right places. And then you ask the question, do they forget where they came from? Yeah. And any big business growing fast, I'm sure you experience this, you're constantly making sure that you stay in touch with your values that you had. And what do they look like today? And they may change, but that was what was important. That's what got you here. Yeah. And it's important not to forget that. And, classic story, it's a great case study. Nokia showed that it kind of forgot that. And then, of course, the iPhone turned up.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. So from Nokia on the client side, you dipped your toe back into agency side for a period.
Cold, hard career choice. At least I thought it was, which was, okay, you've learned the basics. You've exposed yourselves to depth in a business. Now to move up the cold hard career choice was I don't have any management experience. I don't have any leadership experience. I need to learn that. And so going back to TNS was great because one, I was going in at director level, so I had a team.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for all their support at the time because I was new to that and leading teams, leading clients. But also it helped me broaden my kind of methodological experience.
Sure.
And so you get back into that fast-paced agency world and the thrill that is always hard to find anywhere else of winning clients, winning projects. I mean, nothing beats that.
Yeah.
And I had a really great time at what became Kantar at TNS Technology under Amy Cashman. And that was just a fantastic 4 years. And it coincided with having twins.
Congratulations.
So I guess one thing about the agency life and having twins is lots of hours at the time and then lots of commitment with juggling two little ones. So after 4 years, I had to make some choices there.
Yeah.
But, that's life.
And would you have said that your Nokia experience by the time you were at TNS acted as an advantage because you understood that
I thought so, and I hope so.
Yeah.
That's probably for other people to judge. But one of the key things is starting on telephones, going to agency, to client, to agency, you have to take all that experience with you. And there's no doubt that in normal terms, client-side people go to agency or agency people go to client-side are just better for it.
Yeah.
And so, one of the career things, if I was talking to anyone coming or thinking about a career, I would say, go and get as many experiences as possible. And that can mean many, many things. And you don't have to switch sides of the fence, but if you get the opportunity, try it, because you will lose nothing and potentially gain huge amounts in terms of the knowledge and experiences you then take to whatever your choice is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then as life moved you back to client side, to me, looking at your background, it really feels like we hit the pinnacle of your education, your passions, your growing career in market research as you tie together tourism and leisure and hospitality with market research at IHG.
Yeah, so IHG was a really good opportunity. It had no research function, certainly in the region, Europe, Middle East and Africa. And so there was an opportunity to start something new. I look back on those times and think how green I was in terms of, this was asking a new question. How does an entire business function or business group, what does it need in terms of intelligence?
Yeah.
And so I applied what knowledge I had there, but looking back, I wish I knew what I know now then, because I think I would have done it very differently. But moving back into the world of tourism was quite amusing to me. Because that would have been 15 years since I kind of got out of university and that world. So I remember looking for old textbooks and thinking, is there anything I need to know here? Funnily enough, the things you did notice were things like the Boston Matrix, the 4 C's, 6 P's, whatever they may be today. And actually it was more about business.
Sure. And
what you realize is, business is full of tools and processes. Some of them are great. Some of them are okay, and then an awful lot of them aren't so good.
Indeed.
And need to change with the times. But that was a really good learning. So I got back into the idea of tourism, but in 10 years, the business had changed. What I learned about tourism, other than the basics, was very, very different.
Yeah.
Thinking about technology, booking systems, platforms, but the idea of hospitality hadn't changed.
Indeed. And Nick, you mentioned there that if you knew what you knew now, some of those early decisions you may have made differently. Would you care to tell us a little bit more about some of those?
So I think sometimes you feel when you've been working in particular client-side business, you think you have to tick a number of boxes. One is like, do we know how our brands are performing?
Sure.
Do we know how the financials are performing? Have I got the tools that tell me that? Have we got the kind of qualitative supply so I can really understand my consumers deeply? And I think it's the right thing to do. You make sure, what foundational tools have we got that keep the business moving forward? At the time, I was probably thinking, what foundational tools do we need as a market research function?
Yeah.
If I went in there now, I say, what do we need to move the business forward? And I would have had a much, much greater focus on financials, economics, and growth.
Yeah.
Instead of just consumer understanding. And I think I hope we touch on it later. The reason I'm making some of the decisions I am now is to solve for a gap that I think the insights industry just hasn't quite got right.
Indeed.
Which is a focus on research tools and not on moving businesses forward and growth, basically.
Yeah.
Getting down to the hard, fast, EBITDA, bottom line, and putting insights at the forefront. And so that's what I would have done differently.
And do you think when that sort of light bulb moment triggered for you, that was quite an important step in your career because you start talking the language of the business rather than the language of the function?
Definitely. And that takes time and takes a lot of learning and a lot of mistakes, actually, because I think the business looks at you as being a knowledge supplier.
Yeah.
Now, how do you break out of that? That takes a long time. That takes you've got to change the culture of yourselves as a team and your attitude about where you're going to position yourselves. And then you've got to consistently talk about that. And when you have marketing teams that just expect you to, here's the brief, you go and do that research and test that advert.
Yeah.
Well, of course you have to do that. But you've also got to reposition and get them thinking, well, it's not just about giving you a tick box, yes or no, good to go. It's what is this going to do for the business?
Yeah.
And actually, could we do something better? So a light bulb moment, yes, and being aware is great, but I had no idea at the time actually how to solve for that. And actually the last 10, 15 years have been about fine tuning and understanding, and everybody's in the same boat talking about being at the right table, but very few people are doing it. So let's solve for that, and that's where I am now.
Yeah, and it still feels like arguably the biggest challenge. I spoke on one of these podcasts very recently that I've been in the industry approaching 20 years, and 20 years ago it was the big challenge. Can we get a seat at the table?
Exactly.
And dare I say it still is the challenge.
Exactly.
And very few have really been able to crack that code.
Well, then there's the opportunity, and that's my mission.
Well, let's very quickly touch on Carlsberg, and then we can talk to the future. So again, thinking about that sliding doors moment, you have an incredible stint with IHG and the growth and the new products and the new expansion and so on must be very exciting. You then decide to change sector quite drastically.
Yes. So as I talk to you in this kind of therapy session, I've described it as making cold, hard career decisions. Whether they are cold and hard is something I'll have to reflect on. But moving to Carlsberg was, for me, doing something that I said I would, at one point I said I would never do, which is go into FMCG.
Yeah.
Back in the days, I used to think that you were either FMCG in research or you were not. And the two sides never mixed.
Yeah.
And being on the not side of the fence, my impression, wrongly at the time, was that FMCG don't recruit anyone but FMCG. And that's kind of, you saw evidence of that. But I was moving around other sectors. I thought, well, I've got something to offer. But is anyone going to give me the chance? Well, the opportunity at Carlsberg came up, and FMCG experience didn't matter. What mattered was they needed a function to work for the business. And so I was brought in on that premise. And the FMCG is something, well, one assumes, and rightly so, Jessica Spence at the time, the CCO, just expect me to learn the nuances of that. And so I had a hugely steep learning curve, but I was most pleased because I wanted to make that jump.
Yeah.
And again, in retrospect, I wish I'd done FMCG way earlier.
Yeah.
Way earlier than I had, if only because the FMCG people are, I'm going to offend an awful lot of people, are genuinely more commercially aware.
Yeah.
Because they have to be.
And faster paced?
Yes. Ish. I think faster paced, it feels faster paced because the targets and everything is year to year, 12 months, 12 months. We can talk at length about whether that's the right thing. Not always, but that's the reality. In the world of hotels, you're building, the life cycles of product development are much longer.
Sure.
You know, even a franchise business model versus, PLCs, whatever, shareholder model, the dynamics are different. You can make investment decisions for the long term. Whereas sometimes in FMCG or PLCs or whatever, with shareholders, it's always short-term thinking. And, we've been through a turbulent time over the last 5 years, and you see that short-term thinking coming to the fore. But the fact is, you have to be commercially minded, and you really need to know what impact this research is going to have and what return it's going to drive in a way that I hadn't had that experience before.
Yeah.
So, and it was also the opportunity to work in beer, which is like, who's going to turn that down? Which is a fantastic industry with amazing people. And then you get into the flavors and all those kind of things. And it opens up another world. And it was Denmark. And, at the time we were planning to move the family out there. COVID happened. So for whatever reason, that didn't happen. But I continued to, live and work out there for 4 years. And Copenhagen's a beautiful city.
So let's touch on that a bit. So you really went all in, right? You were living in Copenhagen for 3-4 days of the week?
Yeah, 3-4 days of the week. My wife gave up work. So having been traveling around the world and my wife working as well and bringing up family, that was manageable. But when I knew I was going to be away for most of the week, she was only too happy to stop. And I was only too happy for her to stop. And, she's been amazing throughout. So I was going to be there going week to week, living out there, working out there, largely coming home at weekends. It was never as bad as we thought it could be.
Okay.
And that's testament to the strength of us and the family unit. And, there comes a point, I think, yes, the shiny elements kind of came off after a few years. And again, I think, COVID and supply chains, the business kind of felt like a bit of a grind. So when it was time to go, that was fine.
Yeah.
That was fine. But, an amazing experience. And again, the team there, I think of Alicia, Jenny, Piotr, Serkan, Sergey, they're just amazing people from all sorts of different backgrounds around the world.
Yeah.
And I learned so much from them. I just, so thankful for that experience. So, who knows where the opportunities come from, but you just
take them,
grab them, right? And you make the best of them. That's the thing, is always making the best of them because they're always an opportunity there.
Fantastic. No, fascinating. Nick, I'm going to change directions very slightly here. We have a lot of people on the sort of agency supplier side that listen to this podcast. And I'm going to guess over the years working in the brand roles that you have, your inbox has never been far away from an inbound message of a fantastic new market research methodology, technology, etc., that they're trying to sell to you.
Right.
And so what I'm intrigued to understand is what, if anything, really used to work to cut through? What was going to gain your attention in your role? Was it luck? Was it judgment? Was it timing? Or was it a particular code that hit a nerve that would allow you to respond?
Look, I have every respect for agencies trying to sell their position. I've been there before. I'm now there again. It's a combination of a number of things. I think one, you mentioned the word timing. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Agencies, anyone trying to sell anything should understand the timing life cycle of planning in any business. Now, there's awareness building, so you can always be on and getting messages out, but there is a time for client sides to make a decision about what work they're going to do. They have a planning cycle. They have to win budget. They have to say in that budget planning process what I'm going to spend my money on. So a lot of big decisions are made 3 months before the end of the financial year for the next year, and it's already done and dusted. So selling in, my advice, and I'm going to be having to take this myself, is that you're building for a longer term.
Yeah.
And, connecting and creating relationships. If you've got a good story and a good product, that will cut through.
Yeah.
But you can't expect an immediate response because you need the business to understand how it fits in my life, how it's relevant, what it's going to give me, and then I can start planning for it and get money for it.
So your advice might be to actually try and better understand the business and the buyer than it is to try and craft the perfect email.
Yes, because I think the perfect email is going to be more perfect if you understand the right context and the relevancy and the timing. It's also a relentless task. I've been working with some agencies recently about their commercial thinking, and timing is so important. Some of them do an amazing job in having presence, going for awards, having a viewpoint, but it's relentless. You have to be there all the time, right?
Indeed.
You know this very, very well. You can't just drop something in there and then be dark for 6 months.
Yeah.
The good news is, if you do make that effort, you're going to be better than 9 out of 10 agencies.
Yeah.
And it's just seeing that as an important part of what we do. Thought leadership, spreading knowledge, sharing. This industry is like no other for the way it shares, which I think we should all be grateful for because we all learn from each other. But you've got to be relentless in that. in that pursuit.
Yeah. And Nick, you've teased us a little bit about what you're thinking about next and your need to put your sales cap on. Do you care to tell us a little bit about that?
Look, it goes back to one of those pivotal moments of understanding in your career is you are a market researcher or an insight specialist or a knowledge manager or whatever you want to call yourself, data scientist. What we are dealing with is intelligence.
Yeah.
And I wish more people understood how you change the culture and adapt a culture in a business to receive intelligence. Some businesses are very transactional and they just want box ticking.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, of the three main tasks, I think, for insights, the risk aversion or protecting a business from risk or loss is one of the key things that we do, right? We do testing. It's all about loss prevention, risk reduction. You know, we have that task, everything to do with kind of in-year, for-the-year ad testing, product testing, packaging, all those kind of things, pricing. The other task we have is about accountability, which is helping the business understand, is it on the right journey? Trackers.
Yeah.
You know, are we doing the right thing? Are enough people seeing the ads? Are we got enough volume and value going out the door, back in the door? We have those two tasks of gatekeeping and accountability. And then we have this task about value generation. And we do that to a degree, but we don't do it anywhere near enough. Like, where is the growth and how are we going to get it?
Yeah.
What are the trends and where's the future revenue for this business? And of those three tasks, we tend to focus all our attention on gatekeeping and then accountability, tracking, all those kind of things. We don't give anywhere near enough attention to growth. And Growth Constructors, the business we started, is absolutely focused on solving for insights, impact, and connection to growth. We should be owning that, driving that, because we have all the data to do it.
Yeah.
And we just need to be aware of how we can do that. So Growth Constructors is the name of the business. And we've developed a system which is essentially the GPS for growth.
And it
takes away all guesswork from business planning. Tells you exactly where you're going to win, what's available, what levers you need to pull, how much you need to pull them, and make sure you've got the lean portfolio and brands to do that. But there's a flip side to that, which is the growth insights capability. I would love to see insight teams, both agency and client, actively focus on growth insights.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? You know, we always say that we're contributing to growth, but we do it from the sidelines. We test a product that may go out, that people may buy, and it may be a success. For me, that's being on the sidelines. And I want insights to be right at the forefront, telling the business which direction to go in, whether that product's going to work, how it's the best way to sell that product, and then look at the revenue and returns that we'll get. I mean, insights to EBITDA is the connection I just want to see like that.
I think it's incredibly exciting. And I think, if you look at the buying mindset of a C-suite, they either want to know, how do I grow or how do I save money? Yeah. And I think far too often, as you say, those first two categories often put us sort of somewhere in the middle of bobbing along and not changing.
Yeah.
Can we maintain our status quo? Well, that doesn't make us more money. It doesn't grow the top line either.
Exactly. There was a quote from Harvard Business Review that said something along the lines of, 74% of CMOs say they don't believe their jobs allow them to maximize their impact on the business. And 80% of CEOs don't trust or are unimpressed by their CMOs. Can we not ask ourselves the question, why do CEOs not trust their insights and knowledge they're getting? Why? I think we should ask ourselves, because we're not at the C-suite, we're not at those tables, so what's the story?
Yeah.
We need to solve for that question, and that's exactly what I intend to do, because those epiphany moments, understanding it's not just a research project you're doing, you're trying to move the business forward, but I didn't know how to, I know how to now. First job, though, is for people to recognize there's an issue. And I think we do, because we're constantly talking about being at the right table, having impact. And yet we're not really asking ourselves the question of what do we actually do to solve that? Other than things like making our tools faster and cheaper. And for me, that's just commoditizing what we do and will only go on contributing to our commoditization. And I absolutely do not want to see that.
Yeah. Well, look, super, super exciting and one hell of a large challenge to tackle. So wish you all the best.
Thank you.
People should reach out directly if they're interested in what you're saying.
They can. LinkedIn's by far the best place, and I'm open to all sorts of conversations. One of the best things about this industry, I mentioned about the sharing and connection and networking. We all play an increasingly active part in the industry, and I love what you're doing here because the giving back bit is really, really important. And I don't know another industry that does it as well and is as committed to it as Insights.
Yeah.
And so, all power to you. But LinkedIn is a great place, and yeah, let's get connected.
And on that point, Nick, you've given a lot back to this industry, be it working with Aura, be it working with the MRS and the client councils on both sides of that. I'm guessing as a commercially minded individual, there's a reason for doing that not only does it feel great to give back, but there's some value that creates in that network and so on.
Yeah. And really, it speaks to what I love, my passion for this industry, but I'm also trying to address what pisses me off about it, which is we could be so much better at what we do and the impact we have. If I look back on the entire career and a career in Insights, one of the things about this is I always thought, maybe naively, that we could have an impact on the world. You as an individual can actually change the world in some small way.
Yeah.
Grand, naive, misguided, maybe at one point that was. But in Insights, I think you can, because whether it's the product that you're investigating or fine-tuning or optimizing, someone somewhere is going to enjoy that.
Yeah.
They're going to enjoy that experience, they're going to enjoy drinking that beverage, whatever it may be. You can actually have an impact on the world. So why not try and maximize our impact on the world? And that's really what drives me on, because it's really upset me that we've not got that right.
Indeed. I had a brilliant statement from an industry leader recently, which said, Insights hold the power to the truth.
Yes.
And I think that actually in this world, more than ever, we need truths.
Yes.
And we as an industry need to, done correctly,
yes.
we need to do our work correctly. We can bring truths to the fore, whether that's the truth around what product's going to be successful,
yes.
whether that's the truth around what people really think about current affairs. And I think you're so right. We can hold so much power and influence and change this world for the better.
Especially in this time of AI revolution or evolution. We don't quite know which outcome it will be, right?
We sure will see. And leads us on really, really nicely, Nick, that you've obviously seen a lot of evolution in this sector, a lot of evolution around the skills that are required. But as you sit here right now, we've got both technologies coming to the fore. We've clearly got a huge opportunity to commercialize our research more. If you were talking to researchers early in their career, what skill sets do you think would be the most critical for them to be focusing on?
Start with soft skills. I think the networking and getting involved is paramount. If you really want to make a success of this, you do have to put some effort in.
Yeah.
It doesn't come to you. It might feel like it comes to you, but that's only as a result of the hard work that goes into opening yourself up and being available.
Yeah.
And so I will always say get involved. And there's so many ways to get involved, not only in your own companies, in your own groups, agencies, client side alike, but there's a number of bodies that you really can get involved, and they are crying out to have people involved and help and volunteer. I mean, it's just, there's so many opportunities, so take them. I think, I've touched on learning from others. Surround yourself with good people is, always advice to someone new, and you'll find your crowd and you'll find the people you learn from. And that speaks to the ultimate thing, which is always get out of your comfort zone. So changing category for me and starting a business now, I embrace it because I'm scared, but I'm out of my comfort zone, and I know history has shown that give it time and I will kill it, and I will know how to do this. I won't know how to do it perfectly. I still don't know how to do market research perfectly. I never will, but I'm still learning and will go on learning. But always, always throw yourself out of your comfort zone and you'll learn. And don't be afraid to speak up and challenge. One of the things I think about this industry and marketing, commercials in general, is there's a lot of reliance on models and habitual ways of thinking.
Yeah.
And our industry has, bun fights about how brands grow, and Peter Field. I mean, Ritson is right. Both of them are right.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be asking ourselves which is the appropriate one to use at the right time for that product in that market, given the competition and the category dynamics? One size fits all rarely works.
Yeah.
So what's the right thing? ask those questions. But we sometimes get beholden to filling in templates and forms in planning, for example, and throwing everything we know, but no meaning. So, there's learnings. So speak up and challenge when's right.
Indeed.
Because you'll learn all these things, but challenge, ask why, you might find an answer.
And I couldn't agree more, and I've heard this so many times from senior folk around our industry. Yes, methodology, technology are critical tools as we go forward. And I'd love to get your view a little bit more on technology in a moment, but actually the importance of those soft skills, those importance of being agile to understand the situation, understand the tool to solve the situation, and then be able to communicate it are just so important if we want this seat at that top table. To touch on the impact that things like, and I know it's a huge industry buzzword, and we've got almost 40 minutes into our podcast before we've spoken about it, but AI's impact on research and insights from your seat, having spent a good number of years leading insights functions, what would you be saying if you were leading an industry insight or a brand insight function right now to your team about using AI?
So, the first thing for me is, I think we're all dipping our toes in, and some are really making big investments.
Yeah.
And I absolutely have every respect for all those groups and teams and companies that are leading the way, because they're going through all the mistakes, they're trying things, some of it will work, and we'll all benefit from that. Yeah. And so I'm all for learning and listening to people and experiences they're going through, whether it's with synthetic data or whatever else it is, automated survey software, chatbots, and all those kind of things, making us all stronger. So there is always an efficiency. When I've kind of decried, missing the growth story and always focusing on speed and cost is always important. You have to make sure you're efficient. You have to make sure we're doing it in the best way possible. But as with all technologies, and I've kind of reflect on big data, we never got big data right. In fact, it was a distraction, because immediately people think we need to then create great big warehouses full of data and never ask themselves, what are we actually going to do with it when we've got it? And I'm encouraged by the fact that with AI, I'm not seeing that.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that. I'm feeling like people are aware of what's the purpose. And if it doesn't work and it doesn't provide value, get rid of it. So that will always be the thing for me. Just because it makes more efficient, that's fine, but it must have a long-term purpose.
Yeah.
But for me, the role of researcher is, it's a bit of a cliche, but balancing the technology with the human.
Yeah.
And the human gives context and understands the nuance where the dynamics are day to day, and is going to make the AI stronger. So, there's a thought AI will get rid of bad researchers or maybe replace bad researchers, but good researchers become absolutely imperative for businesses to nurture and hold on to.
Yeah.
It's because they can marry up the intangible with the kind of technological tangible, and marry the two, and then make better decisions as a result.
So really, it's learn how to leverage these technologies to create greater impact, greater value for the businesses.
Exactly, and be able to merge that two and be comfortable with those two worlds merging.
Yeah. Nick, you spoke earlier about mentors in your career and great figures. Would love to lean on either a singular piece of advice or maybe if you've got more than one that really stood you in good stead throughout career and perhaps even life, both on a personal side and a professional side, if there are any real bits that stand out to you.
Someone once said to me, and excuse my French, but be nice and don't be a dick. Mm-hmm. And coming from someone I highly respected, that's a really great piece of advice.
Yeah.
I've mentioned get out of your comfort zone. I've also learned, because I think out of nervousness or fear, I used to talk too much. So as a career hack, listening is an amazing skill. And again, it's such a cliche and so obvious, but listening and asking questions is a great skill that you can practice constantly.
Yeah.
So be nice and listen.
Fantastic. I remember hearing once in my career that there's a saying where the person who speaks most in a conversation enjoys the conversation the most. So if you want the person you're talking to have a good time, let them talk.
That's brilliant.
And keep your mouth shut.
Exactly right.
Absolutely fascinating. Nick, been a brilliant conversation. It's been so great to hear all of your insights, your incredible career, the value in giving back, the value in mentorship. But I think more than anything, as we as an industry really try and take a step forward, it's about impact, it's about value, and it's about perhaps not getting bogged down in the methodology. And I think that that's incredibly sage advice for anyone at any point in their career, any side of the fence in this industry to take on board. And if we can drive growth, or if we can drive EBITDA, we're going to gain more value.
I think so. And for me, when I look at marketing, PR, all the commercial functions, we are the most dynamic.
Yeah.
We have the most change, can be unsettling, but what an exciting place to be. And I think if I had the choice of taking a pathway in any of those, I would absolutely choose Insights.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Lewis.